The little black boy ran toward the roaring motorcycles, tears mixing with rain. "They stole my mom," he cried. The bikers froze, and what they did next would shake the entire city to its core. The sun was sinking behind a rows of decaying houses when 12-year-old Eli Carter dragged a small, tattered backpack down the cracked sidewalk. His shoes had holes, his hands were trembling, and his eyes, red and exhausted, told a story no child should ever have to live. Inside the backpack was a single photo of his mother, a few coins, and a folded piece of paper that read, "Keep going, baby. You're stronger than you think." Eli had been walking for hours through the empty streets of East Ridge, a forgotten town where people survived one hard day at a time. He'd been living alone for nearly 2 weeks, ever since his mother disappeared without a trace. No one believed him when he said she didn't just run off. To the police, she was just another addict who'd left her child behind. But Eli knew the truth. She'd been fighting hard to stay clean, working double shifts at the diner. Something bad had happened, and he wasn't going to stop until he found her. He wandered into the edge of the industrial district, where broken streetlights buzzed and flickered. He was hungry, weak, and scared. But then a thunderous rumble filled the air, the sound of motorcycles. His heart jumped. 3 men on Harleys roared down the street, their headlights cutting through the dusk. Their leather vests glimmered under the setting sun, marked with a patch that red iron shadows MC. Eli froze. Everyone in town whispered about the Iron Shadows, an outlaw biker club you didn't mess with. But right now, fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. He needed help, any help. The riders slowed when they saw him. A scrawny boy standing alone by the road, his face pale and his backpack clutched tight. The leader, a tall man with a graying beard and cold blue eyes, killed the engine and pulled off his helmet. His name was Hawk. To most people, he was a ghost of a man, feared, respected, and unpredictable. "What's a kid doing out here this late?" Hawk's deep voice rumbled like thunder. Eli swallowed hard. I'm looking for my mom." The other bikers exchanged glances. One of them, a younger man with tattoos crawling up his neck, smirked. "You lost, kid? This ain't no playground." But Hawk didn't laugh. Something about the boy's eyes caught him. A mix of fear and fierce determination. He'd seen that look before, long ago, in the mirror of his own past. "Where you from?" Hawk asked, stepping closer. Eli hesitated. "Cedar Block Apartments. Building 4. Hawk's expression hardened. That building had a reputation, drugs, gangs, and broken families. The kind of place that ate good souls alive. "You got anybody look out for you?" Hawk asked. Eli shook his head. "No, sir." His voice cracked. "She's all I got. Please, I think someone took her." The wind carried silence between them. The other bikers shifted uneasily, unsure whether to leave or listen. Hawk ran a hand over his beard and studied the boy. The patch on his vest, President, gleamed faintly under the streetlight. "You think we're cops, kid?" Hawk finally said, his tone half amused, half curious. "No," Eli said quietly. "You look like the kind of people who find the ones cops don't." That line hit Hawk harder than he expected. For years, the Iron Shadows have been blamed for everything wrong in the county. Smuggling, fights, missing shipments. But few knew what they really were. A fractured brotherhood trying to atone for the past in their own rough way. Hawk turned toward his crew. "Load up. We're taking the kid to the clubhouse." "What?" "Boss, we don't babysit." "I said we're taking him," Hawk snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. Eli climbed on the back of Hawk's bike, clutching the sides nervously. As they roared to the dark streets, the cool night air whipped against his face. For the first time in days, he didn't feel completely alone. They stopped at an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The building looked abandoned, but inside, warm light spilled across a table covered with maps, tools, and half-empty beer bottles. The scent of leather, oil, and smoke filled the air. Eli sat quietly, clutching the photo of his mother. The bikers murmured among themselves, skeptical and curious. Finally, Hawk pulled up a chair across from him. "All right, kid," he said, lighting a cigarette. "Tell me everything." Eli's voice wavered at first, but then words poured out. How his mom had gotten clean, how she'd been working nights at the diner, how she told him she was being followed by someone in a black car, and how one morning she was just gone. When he finished, Hawk crushed a cigarette into an ashtray and stared at the flickering light. He'd heard stories like this too many times. Women who vanished from bad neighborhoods, their names buried in unsolved case files. The younger biker, Ace, leaned on the table. Could be debt collectors, or worse. You really want to get into this mess, Hawk? Hawk didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed on the boy, this fragile, desperate kid who refused to give up on his mother. Something inside him stirred. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was redemption calling. Finally, Hawk stood up. "We ride at dawn," he said. "If someone took her, we're going to find out who." Eli's eyes widened, a flicker of hope returning for the first time in weeks. The iron shadows might not have been angels, but that night, they were the only ones who believed him. As the engines cooled and the warehouse grew quiet, Hawk glanced once more at the photo on the table, a smiling woman with tired eyes, holding her son close. He exhaled slowly, whispering to himself, "Let's bring her home." That night marked the beginning of a bond neither the boy nor the bikers saw coming, a bond that would change all of them forever. The first rays of dawn crept through the broken windows of the Iron Shadows clubhouse, lighting up dust particles swirling in the smoky air. Hawk was already awake, seated at a scarred wooden table with a pot of coffee steaming beside him. The rest of the crew was still half asleep, their jackets hanging from chairs, helmets scattered across the floor. But when Hawk spoke, every man lifted his head. "We're helping the kid," Hawk said flatly. "No debates." Ace groaned, rubbing his temples. "Boss, we don't even know if his story checks out. You really want to drag the club into another mess?" Hawk's piercing eyes flicked up. "You remember what we used to be, Ace? We used to stand for something. Maybe this kid's the only chance we got to remember who the hell we are." That shut everyone up. The Iron Shadows had once protected their neighborhood before greed and violence tore them apart. Lately, they'd been drifting, chasing money, not meaning. But that morning, something about Eli's story had struck a chord. Eli appeared from the small back room, wearing a jacket far too big for him, donated by one of the bikers. His face still looked weary, but there was determination in his eyes. Hawk poured him a cup of cocoa instead of coffee and slid it across the table. "You sure you're up for this?" Hawk asked. Eli nodded, gripping the cup like it was a lifeline. "I'm not stopping till I find her." That was all Hawk needed to hear. He turned to the others. "We're starting at the diner, where his mom worked. Then we hit Cedar Block and see what's what. Ace, you're with me. Brick, you run the street cams. Twitch, dig into who drives a black car in that area." The men moved fast. Despite their rough edges, the Iron Shadows knew how to get things done. Within minutes, the sound of roaring engines filled the early morning streets again. The diner sat at the corner of Main and Ninth, a greasy spoon called Ruby's Place. It opened early for factory workers and truckers. Hawk and Eli pushed through the door, the bell above it chiming softly. The few customers inside turned to stare at the sight, a leather-clad biker with a kid in tow. Behind the counter, a woman with curly red hair froze mid-pour when she recognized Eli. "Sweetheart, where have you been? We thought—" She stopped herself, lowering her voice. "We thought the state took you." "They didn't," Eli said quickly. "I'm looking for my mom, Miss Ruby." The woman's expression softened. She leaned on the counter. "Baby, your mama was doing good. She'd been clean almost a year. But a few days before she vanished, she came in looking scared. Said someone was watching her. Some man in a black car. Kept showing up out front. I told her to go to the police, but she didn't trust them." Hawk finished for her. Ruby nodded slowly. "Last time I saw her was a Wednesday night. She left early, said she had to meet someone who could make it stop. I never saw her again." Eli's eyes welled with tears. Hawk put a hand on his shoulder, firm, reassuring. "You remember what the guy looked like?" Ruby frowned, thinking. Tall. Wore a suit that didn't fit right. Cheap kind. Had one of those Bluetooth earpieces. "Oh!" And he drove a black Lincoln, newer model. That was enough for Hawk. Appreciate it, ma'am. Back outside, Hawk called Ace on his radio. We got a lead. Black Lincoln, male, mid-40s, cheap suit. Check with Twitch. See if any of those cars were flagged in Cedar Block recently. On it, Ace replied. As they walked toward the bikes, Eli tugged on Hawk's jacket. Do you think she's still alive? Hawk didn't answer right away. He stared down the long stretch of cracked asphalt, then crouched to meet the boy's eyes. We don't stop until we know for sure. You hear me? Eli nodded. By noon, the iron shadows were back at Cedar Block, the place Eli called home. The buildings leaned against each other like drunks after a long night, paint peeling, windows boarded up. People on the sidewalks eyed the bikers warily. Hawk dismounted and motioned for the others to spread out. Ace and Brick started asking around while Hawk and Eli went inside Building 4. The smell of mildew and decay hit them instantly. The elevator was broken, so they climbed the narrow stairwell to apartment 3B, Eli's home. The door creaked open. Inside, the place was a mess. Plates stacked in the sink, half-burned candles, a ripped couch. But something stood out. The table near the window had been overturned, and a faint mark on the floor looked like blood. Eli froze. Hawk knelt beside the mark, touching it with gloved fingers. It's old, he said quietly. Maybe a week. Eli's breathing quickened. That's where she dropped her bag. I remember. Hawk scanned the room again. He noticed something glinting near the vent, a small silver locket. Inside was a picture of Eli as a baby and his mom smiling beside him. Hawk handed it to the boy. She was fighting for you, kid. Don't forget that. Outside, Ace's voice crackled through the radio. Boss, you're going to want to hear this. Twitch traced a black Lincoln spotted near Ruby's Diner, and again by Cedar Block 2 nights later. Registered to a company called Dixon Recovery Services. Sounds like a front. Hawk's jaw tightened. He knew that name. Dixon ran a shady repo and debt collection business, the kind that used muscle, not paperwork. Get everyone back to the clubhouse, Hawk ordered. We're paying Mr. Dixon a visit. Eli clutched the locket as they left, the weight of it pressing against his chest like a promise. The boy who had started this journey alone was now part of something larger, a brotherhood on wheels, fueled not by fear, but by loyalty and vengeance. As the engines roared to life again, Hawk looked in his rear-view mirror at the child riding behind him. In another life, he might have been that boy, scared, angry, desperate to save someone who mattered. Hang on tight, kid, Hawk muttered as they sped toward the horizon. We're just getting started. That day, the Iron Shadows weren't outlaws. They were soldiers of fate, chasing ghosts through the smoke of their own pasts. And for the first time in a long time, Hawk felt like maybe they were doing something right. By late afternoon, the Iron Shadows engines thundered across the county line, trailing dust and fire in their wake. The sun beat down on the cracked highway as Hawk led the convoy toward a low, squat building that sat in the middle of nowhere, Dixon Recovery Services. It looked more like a junkyard than a business, surrounded by rusted cars, barbed wire, and barking dogs. Hawk slowed his bike, eyes narrowing. That's the place, he muttered. Eli sat behind him, clutching the backrest. You think she's here? Maybe not her, Hawk said, but someone here knows where she went. They parked in a loose circle, the growl of engines fading into a tense silence. A few rough-looking men stepped out of the building, eyeing the bikers with suspicion. One of them, a heavy-set man with a buzz cut and a gold chain, smirked. Well, if it ain't the Iron Shadows, he sneered. What brings you boys to my yard? Hawk stepped forward, calm but deadly. We're looking for a woman. Name's Maria Carter. Worked at Ruby's Diner. Disappeared last week. Your car was seen tiling her. The man's smirk vanished for a second before he recovered it. Never heard of her. Ace stepped up beside Hawk, cracking his knuckles. You sure about that, Dixon? 'Cause we can jog your memory real quick. The man laughed, though his eyes darted nervously toward the others. You don't scare me, Hawk. You roll in here like you own the place, but this ain't your turf no more. Hawk didn't blink. We ain't here for turf. We're here for the truth. Dixon started to turn away, waving them off, until Hawk grabbed his arm and slammed him against the hood of a car. The crew tense, ready to fight, but Hawk's grip stayed firm. His voice dropped to a low growl. You and I both know this ain't about repossessing cars. You've been running something dirtier out of here, and people are disappearing. You tell me where that woman is, or I'll burn this yard to ground. The man's face turned red as he struggled. You're insane. You got nothing on me. But Hawk noticed something. The faint twitch in Dixon's eye, the nervous glance toward the back office door. That was enough. Brick, Hawk called. Check that office. Brick kicked the door open without hesitation. Inside, papers and files were scattered across the floor, along with a half-empty bottle of whiskey. On the desk, a folder labeled Maria Carter sat in plain sight. Got something, boss, Brick shouted. Eli's heart leapt as he rushed toward the door. Inside, he saw his mother's name on the folder. Proof she'd been here. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside were photos of his mother, a few debt collection slips, and a handwritten note. Owed $6,000. Delivered to Rafe at Dock 12. Eli looked up, tears welling. They took her for money. Hawk's jaw clenched. Who's Rafe? He demanded. Dixon stayed silent, blood trickling from his lip. Hawk slammed his fist beside his head. Answer me. All right. Dixon gasped. Rafe's a buyer. He runs cargo out of the docks. Smuggles people, not just goods. I swear I didn't touch the lady. She was just leverage. He said he'd pay me to keep her quiet. The room went still. Even the bikers who'd seen everything looked shaken. Eli's voice trembled. You sold my mom? Dixon didn't look at him. Kid, you don't understand how the world works. But before he could finish, Hawk's fist connected with his jaw, sending him crashing to the floor. Hawk towered over him, rage burning in his eyes. You don't get to talk about the world to a boy who's already lived through hell. He turned to his crew. We're heading to Dock 12. If that man's moving people, we shut it down. Tonight. Eli looked up at him, fear and hope warring in his eyes. You mean we're going to find her? Hawk nodded. We'll find her, kid, one way or another. Back outside, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and crimson. The iron shadows mounted their bikes again, a storm gathering in their hearts. For them, this wasn't just another job. It was a reckoning. As they roared down the highway toward the industrial waterfront, Hawk radioed the others. No police. No backup. We do this our way. Ace's voice crackled back. You think Rafe'll have men? Count on it, Hawk said. But we've fought worse. Eli clung to him tighter as they approached the docks. Massive cranes loomed overhead, their silhouettes black against the blood-red sky. The air smelled of salt and diesel. Somewhere beyond the chain-link fences, the faint echo of voices carried through the night. They parked near a row of shipping containers and killed the engines. Ace and Brick took the left flank, while Hawk and Eli crept forward. They spotted a few men loading something into a truck. Not cargo, but people, frightened and silent, their wrists bound. Eli's heart pounded. That's him, he whispered. That's Rafe. The man in charge stood tall, wearing a sleek leather coat, a scar slicing down his cheek. He barked orders while checking his watch. Hawk's voice was low, controlled. Stay behind me, kid. He signaled his crew. Within seconds, the quiet docks erupted into chaos. Engines roared to life. Flashlights cut through the dark, and the iron shadows surged forward like thunder. Drop it. Ace shouted, tackling one of the guards. Fists flew, metal clanged, and the air filled with shouts and the growl of rage-fueled vengeance. Rafe reached for his gun, but Hawk was faster. He swung a steel chain from his belt, wrapping it around Rafe's wrist and yanking him forward. The gun skittered across the ground. You got something that belongs to this kid, Hawk growled. Rafe spat blood. She's already gone. Eli's stomach dropped. No. Where is she? Rafe grinned, even through the pain. You're too late. The shipment left an hour ago. Before Hawk could react, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had tipped off the police. Hawk turned to his crew. We're out of time. Grab what you can. We move now. Eli's voice cracked with desperation. We can't leave her. Hawk knelt, gripping the boy's shoulders. We're not leaving her, kid. We're following her trail. Wherever she went, we'll find her. I promise. The roar of engines filled the night again as they sped away from the docks, the city lights flashing behind them like distant fire. Eli looked back once. The image of those containers burned into his mind. He didn't know where his mother was, but he knew one thing for certain. The iron shadows weren't stopping until they brought her home. And this time, they weren't just fighting for her. They were fighting for redemption. The night wind whipped through Eli's hair as the iron shadows rode hard down the empty interstate. The flashing lights of the city faded behind them, replaced by endless miles of dark highways stretching toward the southern border. The boy clung to Hawk's back, his small fingers gripping the leather tightly. Every turn of the wheels felt like a race against fate. They had escaped the police, but not without cost. Brick's bike had taken a bullet through the gas tank, forcing him to ride double with Ace. Twitch had taken a hit to the shoulder, but refused to stop. And Hawk, he hadn't said a word since the docks. His mind was locked on one thing. Maria Carter was still out there. Inside Hawk's head, old memories clawed their way to the surface. A wife he couldn't save, a daughter he hadn't seen in years, a life full of ghosts and regrets. Helping this kid was more than just doing the right thing. It was redemption. They stopped briefly at a gas station miles outside the city. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. The place was quiet except for the buzz of a soda machine. Hawk filled up the tank, while Eli sat on the curb, clutching the silver locket his mother had left behind. Ace checked a burner phone, scanning the messages Twitch had hacked from Dixon's files. "Got something, boss," he said, scrolling quickly. "Shipment manifest from last night. Cargo headed south, destination El Paso. Truck number matches what we saw at the docks." Hawk exhaled, tossing his empty coffee cup. "That's our lead. How far?" "About 200 miles, give or take." Ace said, "If we ride hard, we can catch him by dawn." Eli looked up, eyes wide. "We can still make it?" Hawk gave a small nod. "If we push through the night." The men mounted up again, engines roaring to life. The gas station lights faded behind them as they disappeared into the desert road. The stars spread wide above like silent witnesses. Hours passed. The roar of the bikes blended with the rhythmic hum of the wind. Occasionally, they'd spot headlights in the distance. Border Patrol, truckers, or lost souls wandering the highway. But the iron shadows didn't stop. As dawn broke, the horizon glowed in hues of orange and pink. Twitch's voice crackled over the radio. Truck spotted. 2 miles ahead, Highway 24 near the border checkpoint. Eli's heart pounded. "That's her. It has to be." Hawk accelerated, the rest of the crew following close behind. The truck loomed in the distance, a white 18-wheeler with faded lettering and mud-stained plates. It moved slow, like it carried something precious or dangerous. "All right, listen up," Hawk barked into the comms. "Ace, you take the left side. Brick, block the rear. Twitch, hit the tires when I give the word." Eli held on as the iron shadows surrounded the truck, engines snarling like wolves on the hunt. The driver glanced into his side mirror and swore, realizing too late who was closing in. Hawk pulled alongside the driver's window, slamming his fist against the glass. "Pull over," he shouted. The man inside reached for something. A gun. But before he could aim, Ace's chain lashed out, smashing the mirror clean off. The driver jerked the wheel, the truck swerving wildly across the lanes. "Now!" Hawk yelled. Twitch fired 2 quick shots at the rear tires, sending sparks flying. The truck screeched, tires shredding, before veering off the road and grinding to a halt in a plume of dust and smoke. Eli jumped off as soon as the bike stopped. "Mom!" he screamed, running toward the truck. Hawk followed close behind, wrenching open the trailer doors. Inside were a dozen people huddled together, frightened, dirty, and exhausted, but no sign of Maria. Eli's voice broke. "She's not here." One of the women inside stepped forward weakly, her wrists bruised. "You're looking for Maria Carter?" she asked in a trembling voice. Eli nodded desperately. "Yes." "Do you know her?" "She was with us," the woman said softly. "But one of the guards took her off the truck last night. Said she was special cargo." They put her in a black SUV headed for the border station. She fought them. Hard. Eli's knees nearly buckled. Hawk caught him before he fell. She's still alive, Hawk said firmly. They wouldn't move her if she wasn't. Ace cursed under his breath. That means she's crossing into Mexico. Once she's over, it's a whole new game. Hawk looked toward the horizon, a line of sand, wire, and border checkpoints stretching for miles. He turned to his men. We're not letting that happen. Not on my watch. The crew knew what that meant. Crossing the border meant stepping into a world with no laws and no safety net. But none of them hesitated. Eli wiped his tears, his small voice steady now. She's my mom. I'm going too. Hawk placed a hand on his shoulder. You got more guts than most grown men I know, kid. But stay close to me. You hear? Eli nodded, clutching the locket tight. They refueled quickly, then headed toward the checkpoint. The heat was rising fast, the air thick with tension. The iron shadows split into pairs to avoid drawing too much attention. By the time they reached the last turn before the border, Hawk spotted it. A black SUV parked beside an old warehouse just off the highway. Two men stood guard, smoking cigarettes and checking their watches. That's our target, Hawk whispered. We do this clean and fast. He signaled to the crew. Within seconds, the bikers spread out, moving like silent shadows. Brick cut the power lines. Twitch disabled the SUV's tires, and Ace crept up behind the guards. In one swift motion, Ace struck both with the butt of his gun, dropping them before they could react. Eli ran inside the warehouse as Hawk kicked the door open, and there she was, Maria Carter, bound to a chair but alive, her face bruised yet defiant. Mom! Eli cried, rushing to her. Maria's tear-filled eyes widened. Eli? Oh, my God! Before they could embrace, shouts erupted from outside. Reinforcements had arrived, armed men with rifles, moving fast. Hawk drew his gun, firing a warning shot. Ace, get the kid and his mom out of here. Bullets tore through the wooden walls as the iron shadows returned fire. The roar of engines, the scream of tires, the clash of vengeance and hope filled the desert air. Eli held his mother tight as Ace dragged him toward the bikes. Maria sobbed into her son's shoulder. I knew you'd come for me. Not me, Eli whispered through his tears. Us. Behind them, Hawk and his crew held the line, protecting like a wall of steel and fury. For the first time in years, the iron shadows weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for something pure. As they sped away from the border under a burning sunrise, Eli looked back one last time, seeing Hawk's silhouette in the dust. The man who had once been feared by everyone was now the one person Eli trusted with his life. And the road ahead was far from over. The morning light filtered through the courthouse windows, painting golden stripes across the marble floor. The air was thick with tension. Reporters filled the benches, microphones ready, cameras flashing. Everyone had come to witness what they were calling the biker case. At the center of it all sat Lydia, calm but anxious, her hands trembling slightly as she squeezed Malik's tiny fingers. Behind her, the motorcycle club, their leather vests polished, patches gleaming, formed a silent wall of support. Tank and Jake stood tall, their faces solemn but proud. They'd fought too hard to let intimidation win now. On the other side of the courtroom sat Officer Carson, his jaw tight, eyes darting nervously. His expensive lawyer whispered frantically, but Carson barely listened. His confidence, that smug arrogance, was gone. The truth had shattered his armor. Judge Morales entered, her stern gaze scanning the room before settling on Lydia. Let's proceed, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes betrayed that she knew this was no ordinary case. The prosecutor stepped forward. Your Honor, we present overwhelming evidence that Officer Carson falsified charges against Ms. Lydia Williams and unlawfully confiscated her savings. We have bank records, video proof, and witness testimony confirming that the funds in question were obtained legally through her work as a nurse's assistant. Gasps rippled across the room. Lydia lowered her head, tears welling up. For months she'd been branded a criminal. Now the truth was finally being spoken aloud. Carson's lawyer tried to object. These so-called witnesses are bikers, Your Honor, known lawbreakers, with no credibility. Before the judge could respond, Jake stepped forward. Your Honor, with respect, we may wear leather, but that doesn't make us liars. We protect this community more than some people in uniform ever have. His tone was firm but respectful. The courtroom fell silent. Even Carson flinched. The prosecutor continued. We also have video footage from a night of the arrest. It shows Officer Carson verbally threatening Ms. Williams and making racially charged remarks. Judge Morales looked up sharply. Play the footage. The room dimmed slightly as the projector came alive. On the screen, Carson's voice echoed, dripping with contempt. You people think you can get away with anything. The footage showed Lydia, crying, clutching her son's hand as Carson smirked. Then came the sound of the locker slamming and the accusation that would nearly destroy her life. By the time it ended, the silence was suffocating. Lydia sobbed quietly, Malik hiding his face in her lap. Jake's fists were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Judge Morales finally spoke. Officer Carson, do you have anything to say for yourself? Carson stood, sweating, his voice shaky. It was a misunderstanding. I was following procedure. Procedure? Jake barked from the gallery before Tank placed a hand on his shoulder, calming him. The judge's gavel struck once. Order. Carson's lawyer tried to regain control. Your Honor, my client has served honorably for over 10 years. Judge Morales interrupted, her tone ice cold. And in those 10 years, how many innocent people has he silenced? The courtroom erupted. The judge slammed her gavel again. Enough. She took a deep breath, then continued. This court finds Officer Richard Carson guilty of misconduct, falsifying evidence, and racial discrimination under color of law. Effective immediately, he is stripped of his badge and sentenced to 5 years in state prison. A collective gasp filled the room. Lydia froze. Then, slowly, tears streamed down her face, not of pain this time, but of relief. Malik jumped from his seat and hugged her tightly. The bikers cheered, clapping and whistling until the judge had to smile despite herself. As the guards led Carson away, his eyes darted toward Jake. You think this changes anything? He hissed. Jake stared him down. Yeah, it changes everything. Outside the courthouse, sunlight bathed the crowd. Reporters surrounded Lydia. Flashing cameras, microphones thrust forward. She looked overwhelmed. But Tank stepped beside her, towering like a shield. One question at a time, folks, he rumbled. Jake placed a hand on her shoulder. You did it. You fought back. Lydia smiled faintly. No, we did. You gave me strength when the world turned its back. She looked down at Malik, who clutched Jake's vest. And you, little man, you never gave up on your mama. Malik grinned, shyly. You guys are heroes. Tank chuckled. We're just bikers who hate bullies. Jake laughed softly. Same thing, kid. The crowd began to disperse, and as they walked toward their bikes, Malik tugged Jake's arm. Can I ride one day? Jake crouched to his level. You learn the rules first, respect courage, and always stand up for what's right. Then you can ride with us. Malik's face lit up with pure joy. Deal! They roared off down the street, the sound of engines echoing like thunder. But this time, it wasn't a warning, it was victory. The people in the town watched them go, whispering to each other about how the bikers had stood up for justice when no one else would. Weeks later, Lydia returned to her job, her name cleared, her dignity restored. A news outlet even ran a feature titled The Nurse and the Bikers Who Fought Back. Donations poured in from strangers moved by her story. And every Sunday afternoon, a group of bikers would pull up near the park. Malik would come running, helmet too big for his head, laughing as Jake lifted him onto a bike for a slow, careful ride around the lot. As the sun set, Jake often thought about how one cry for help. They stole my mom, had changed all their lives. They hadn't just saved a family. They reminded the world that justice doesn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it rides on 2 wheels. And as their engines rumbled into the distance, one thing was certain. The road ahead was wide open, and this time it belonged to the good guys. Carson tried to destroy an innocent family, but ended up destroying himself. Because when the system fails, justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected heroes. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because true courage deserves to be remembered,